Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program today. UN Commission of Inquiry says Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. The Foreign Ministry rejects this. Israel launches major ground offensive on Gaza City as thousands of Palestinians flee down a single coastal road to the center of the Strip. Plus, President Donald Trump says there's no proof U.S. strikes hit Venezuelan narco-terrorists who were on their way to the U.S. Let's begin the world today. A United Nations Commission of Inquiry says Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. A new report says there are reasonable grounds to conclude that 4 of the 5 genocidal acts defined under international law have been carried out since the start of the war with Hamas in 2023. And this includes killing members of a group, causing them serious bodily and mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to destroy the group, and preventing births. It cites statements by Israeli leaders and the pattern of conduct by Israeli forces as evidence of genocidal intent. However, Israel's foreign ministry says it categorically rejects the reports, denouncing it as distorted and false.
The Commission found that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces committed and are continuing to commit the following underlying acts of genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. 1, killing members of the group. 2, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. And 4, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. On the specific intent of genocide, the Commission concludes that statements made by Israeli authorities are direct evidence of genocidal intent. The Commission also concludes that the pattern of conduct is circumstantial evidence for genocidal intent, and that genocidal intent was the only reasonable inference that could be drawn from a totality of the evidence. Therefore, the Commission concludes that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces have the genocidal intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
In the meantime, Israel has heavily struck Gaza City overnight as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirms a powerful operation has been launched in the Strip. It comes amid unconfirmed reports that Israel has now launched its ground offensive to occupy the entire city. The Prime Minister says Gaza City is Hamas's last major stronghold and has vowed to take control of it. The plan to do so has brought international criticism to Israel. Now, as for journalists on the ground, well, they say that there's been almost constant Israeli airstrikes and artillery and gunfire in Gaza City. That assault has been condemned by UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk, who described them as totally and utterly unacceptable. The Israel Defense Forces estimates 350,000 people have fled Gaza City, though more than that number are thought to have remained. Well, back to Israel. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the strikes on Hamas leaders in Doha was not a failure. He refuses to rule out doing the same again in the future. He was making the comment during a press conference alongside U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Jerusalem on Monday. Netanyahu also says Israel assumed full responsibility for the attack because, according to him, terrorists should not be given a haven, and the people who planned the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust cannot have immunity. Israel hit the Hamas leadership in Doha last week, sparking widespread international condemnation.
I've said repeatedly that Israel's decision to act against the Hamas terrorist leadership in Qatar was a wholly independent decision by Israel. It was a decision taken by me and our top security force chiefs. It was conducted by us and we assume full responsibility for it because we believe that terrorists should not be given a haven, and the people who planned the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust cannot have immunity. So we did it on our own, period.
All I would add is that we are focused on what happens now, what happens next, what role can Qatar play possibly in reaching an outcome here that leads not just to the end of this hostilities, not just to the release of all of the hostages, both living and deceased, not just the disarmament and elimination of Hamas, but also a better future for the people of Gaza, which isn't possible as long as Hamas exists, which isn't possible as long as 48 hostages are being held. And so we're going to continue to encourage Qatar to play a constructive role in that regard. We're focused because at the end of the day, no matter what has happened, these fundamentals still remain. There is still a Hamas, there is still 48 hostages, and there is still a war going on. And all of these things standing in the way of a better future for the people of Gaza and a peaceful end to what's happening now. And to see someone who was engaged in what we need more of, assassinated in the process of doing exactly that. Because that's where he was assassinated. He was assassinated in the middle of that kind of discourse. I think was an effort not simply to silence Charlie's voice, but I think is an effort to intimidate and silence that kind of effort in America. And I think for the world to engage in that kind of discourse with people you disagree with. And once a society loses the ability of people with strong disagreements to engage in discourse, then the only option you're left with is either silence or violence, neither one of which is acceptable. Both are very destructive.
Well, over in Qatar, Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani has accused Israel of undermining negotiations following last week's attacks on the Hamas leaders in Doha. Emir Al Thani claimed that Israel struck residential compounds housing members of Hamas's political bureau while aware that the group's leaders were convening there to discuss a ceasefire proposal put forward by the United States. It was part of his comment at the Emergency Islamic Arab Summit in Doha on Monday, a meeting that started on Sunday, preparatory to the main meeting of foreign ministers from 57 Arab and Islamic countries were set up to discuss a statement on the Israeli attack on Qatar. He did condemn the Israeli government, asserting that it seeks to impose its will on the Arabs, but accused the Prime Minister of attempting to transform the Arab region into an Israeli sphere of influence. I want to bring in now public affairs analyst Achike Chude, who joins us from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Achike, thanks for joining us on the program today, and I'm sure that you have been watching with keen interest, what's been happening as Israel further enhances its operations in Gaza and its fight against the Hamas leadership. Do you think the government, however, has gone too far with its campaign to eliminate those Hamas militants by going as far as Qatar and executing those Hamas leaders there?
Yes, well, Marachi, thank you for having me. Obviously, a lot of people will seem to think that Israel has gone far. Israel's traditional allies in Europe, I think some of them have been quite embarrassed that at the level of carnage that has gone on in Gaza and the kind of displacement that has gone on in Gaza again. Obviously, it's been said that around 64,964 people have died since Israel moved into Gaza, though that figure is heavily disputed by Israel. It's a figure that is that was supplied to the United Nations by the authorities in Gaza, and you could say that naturally it would be a biased report, but it also appears that the UN tends to, stick by that report, by that estimate. Over 90% of homes have been destroyed. Healthcare system, sanitation system, have all collapsed. And some UN experts have indicated that famine is taking place right now, shortage of food and water. And so it's a very precarious situation. Has Israel gone far so far in especially going into Qatar to try to find its enemies, members of Hamas's Politburo? I would say yes, because it's not in tandem, it's not respectful, that action is not respectful of international law. And this is, Qatar is an independent country, obviously, but from what the Prime Minister said, that they have a right, for as long as you are harboring non-terrorists, then they have a right to strike wherever they can. And that in itself is a very, very big problem. Obviously, international law has been broken on a number of occasions. Don't forget, the report itself by this international independent commission of inquiry set up by the United Nations that has made this declaration about Israel possibly committing genocide. Obviously has looked at it. They believe that some of the issues that they have come up with are actually happening on ground in Israel. And so it's not a pleasant picture. It's not something that a lot of people, I would say, are comfortable with. But Israel, I believe that it is acting in its best defense. And they tend to go back to what happened last year, October 7th, and then the massacre of over 1,200 people, as well as the taking of hostages. Of course, it was a gruesome act. It was a terrible act that has brought about with it incalculable damage to the whole of, to the Palestinians. And I don't know, perhaps when some of them think about it, they would have perhaps realized that that action itself was not what the consequences that they are facing.
So, yes, the UN reports, of course, brings to light what's currently going on in Gaza, but the UN also does look like it is working, it's playing devil's advocate here, speaking on behalf of Hamas. And then you also have the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying that silence or violence are the options here. The UN is looking more and more powerless in this Israel-Hamas conflict. It's unable to compel Israel to follow resolutions at the UN Security Council. It is also unable to get Hamas to stop its attacks on Israel.
The United Nations is a membership organization. The United Nations on its own is powerless. The United Nations needs powerful countries agreeing with it, and taking action on behalf of the United Nations once there is a general agreement on what needs to be done. And so when the most powerful nation in the world, the United States in this case, is not on the side of the United Nations, but on the side of a party to this conflict, as seen by a lot of people, that is Israel, on the side of Israel, it becomes very difficult for the United Nations to act, because United Nations, compared to the United States, is made up of much weaker nations who can only whimper but not bite. So that is it. So the strength of the United Nations lies on the strength of the countries, or the certain countries of the United Nations that are fully in line with the direction of the United Nations. And so when that is not there, then it becomes a problem. And so it's not just a problem that has to do with Israel. You find out also in Russia, for instance, in the fight between Ukraine and Russia. Russia, made an incursion into Ukraine, and the United Nations was actually not able to do anything. So if China, for instance, the powerful nations in the world also take a cue and move against some parts of, for instance, the South Asian, some of those islands in the South Asian Sea, what would the United Nations actually do? It will not be able to do much because, people have often talked about a rules-based world order. To the extent that some of these major, countries cooperate with the United Nations, you can talk about a rules-based order. But when the violation is being perpetrated by them or allies close to them that they are supporting, then you realize that it's a jungle out there, and there's really nothing like a rules-based order. It is always determined by the bigger, countries in the world. And so the United Nations is a toothless tiger. It's as simple as that. It has tried, it has done a lot of good things in the past and continues to do so. But when it comes to matters like this that involve the great powers, the big powers in the world, nuclear-armed entities, they realize just how helpless the United Nations is. Like I said, its strength is dependent on the strength of the major powers in the world and the support that they give the United Nations. But when, obviously there are also political interests, there are also interests that have to do with these great powers, then you find out that the
Right.
United Nations is hobbled and crippled in its
Achike,
ability to enforce
we
certain
do have to
resolutions.
go now. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your analysis on this. Unfortunately, we never have enough time to delve deeper into these issues, but we do appreciate your coming on the program today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
We're off on a break now on The World Today, still ahead. The longest hanging staircase in Colombia becomes top extreme tourist destination. We have a heart for this. Stay with us.
There are places you would like to go. There are faces you would like to see.
My palm is bruised. It's a tiny scar, but it's very painful.
Too many exciting things happening all at once.
From time I've always loved playing the villain.
But you can't be everywhere. Guess what? Yes, we can. Your favorite lifestyle content lives here. Let us be your eyes and ears here on Entertainment News on Channels Television.
Welcome back. U.S. FBI Director Kash Patel has been questioned at the U.S. Congress about the Bureau's investigation into Charlie Kirk's killing and the recent firings of senior FBI officials who have accused Patel of illegal political retribution. Patel's appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee today is the first oversight hearing of his tenure amidst a time of internal upheaval and mounting concerns about political violence inside the United States. Patel touted his leadership of the nation's premier federal law enforcement agency at the congressional hearing, speaking of a series of what he said were accomplishments of his first months on the job, including his efforts at fighting violent crime and protecting children. He returns to the committee for the first time since his confirmation hearing in January, when he asserted that he would not pursue retribution as director. He faces questions about whether he did exactly that when the FBI last month fired 5 agents and senior officials in a purge the current and former officials say weakened morale and contributed to unease inside the nation's premier federal law enforcement agency. One of the largest mobility trade fairs is taking place in Munich, Germany. Top companies like Volkswagen, Mercedes, and BMW expected to unveil their latest models, but it's not just them on the stage. Companies from all over the world flock to this trade fair. China has a big presence this year as the focus is on electric mobility, something China excels in. The DW's Vada Imran joins me now. Vada, let's talk about the German auto industry and what those big car makers are showing.
Thanks for having me. At the IAA Auto Trade Fair in Munich this year, some German companies are turning back to their old ways. And by that, I mean bringing back friendly, familiar models, but electric. Germany's top auto company, Volkswagen, is turning their design back to basics. And it seems they're moving away and abandoning the rather futuristic, technologically advanced designs for their electric ID models. And BMW is merging its design palette for combustion and electric cars, meaning that electric cars will have that same old school look that BMW clients are such big fans of. Now, the new BMW iX3 electric car has that iconic BMW front grille, you know, that's so anonymous with BMW cars, and this is going to bring them in some sales. German car makers seem to be betting on their own brand and model loyalty this year in an effort to convert their clients to electric and to offer something to counter what Chinese companies are offering. Germany is switching back to its roots. But what was also noticeable at the IAA this year was the size and presence of Chinese companies. Dozens of exhibitors were showing off the latest Chinese cars, parts, and tech.
I can't wait to talk about that, but this is where we'll leave the conversation. We'll talk about those Chinese vehicles some other time. Thanks for joining us on The World Today. Now, just hours from Bogota, the heart of Boyacá, stands the Stairways to Heaven. You could describe it as such. It's officially recognized as the longest hanging staircase in Colombia. It's become a prominent extreme tourism destination. This structure measures 254 meters in length. It features over 600 steps and is part of the Ecoparque El Real in Santa Sofia. Its design challenges even the most daring. Now, in some sections, the structure narrows to just 35 centimeters in width, intensifying the sense of vertigo and turning the crossing into a true test of courage and skill. I can feel myself crying while walking on this. Now, known as the Paso de Angel or Stairway to Heaven, it contributes to the rise of adventure tourism in Colombia, aiming to diversify the tourism offer through high-impact emotional and physical experiences and attractions that challenges both gravity and the vertigo of its visitors. The taste of adventure. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.